Hey you, do you like nature documentaries and Zelda? Then I have good news for you. If you're interested to see what it's like to live as a bokoblin and study their behavior, check out this video I made recently. Link in the description and the end card. So go check it out. Deciding what is canon and what isn't always easy. We know third-party materials like the cartoons, CDI games and mangas aren't canon, since they were not made by Nintendo. But then we have stuff like Creating a Champion, which also isn't made by Nintendo, but it is an official publication which is greenlit by the Big N. And even then, some stuff in the book is widely accepted to be canonical, but we also find elements that have been retconned or changed by Age of Calamity, or left up to the player to decide. Like I said, it isn't always straightforward. Even the official timeline has a footnote that states that it's still up to the player's imagination. Out of all Zelda games, Breath of the Wild might be the most divisive due to the inclusion of so many additional content. Stuff like the amiibos, the DLC, and not to mention the freedom and open nature of the game itself. It's one of the reasons why series producer Eiji Aonuma has been reluctant to say anything about the game's placement in the Zelda timeline, stating things like, quote, "We revealed where each Zelda game fell on a timeline and how their stories relate, but we didn't do that for Breath of the Wild. We realized that people were enjoying imagining the story that emerged from the fragmentary imagery we were providing. If we defined a restricted timeline, then there would be a definitive story, and it would eliminate the room for imagination, which wouldn't be as fun." Although this might not be the answer a Zelda lore detective is looking for, I do understand Aonuma's philosophy here. After all, Breath of the Wild can be completed in so many ways, and depends on whether or not you got all the memories, completed all 120 shrines, and how many divine beasts you conquered, if any at all. Say I free every champion from their divine beast, except for Rivali, because sweet revenge for 100 years ago, you arrogant oversized drumstick. Is that canon to my story? Probably not, and I think most people agree that the quote-unquote true Breath of the Wild story is the one where Link completes all the main story missions. Since although the game is open-ended, this is still the narrative the game tries to push you towards. This includes getting the Master Sword, all your memories, freeing the champions, all that good stuff. And then we have all the extra content. We'll talk about Amiibo another time, since I feel like they deserve their own separate video. But when it comes to DLC, I think the story edition should probably be considered canon. There's just too many important revelations here to simply brush them off as meaningless extras. Examples of this being the Trial of the Sword, which sees Link now with the fully restored Master Sword and being able to hear Fi's voice within the sword. This is a pretty big deal, and I'd argue is too important not to be considered as part of the main narrative. The same thing goes for the inclusion of the 5th Divine Beast and the introduction of Monk Boss Koshia at the end. As for the rest of the DLC, well, there's a lot to take into consideration, some of which are obviously just nods and references like Rex's Salvager outfit from Xenoblade and the Nintendo Switch shirt, while others are nice expansions to Link's abilities such as the Travel Medallion, which I have no problems with being considered canon. It's just another Sheikah relic after all, and it doesn't stray away from what should be possible in the game's story. Which brings us to one piece of the DLC which, although has all the characteristics of being nothing more than a reference, could actually be canonical when we take a closer look at it. I am of course talking about the treasures of Misco, the Great Bandit. Oh, hold on.
Did I hear someone say Bandit?
Oh hey, MaskedNintendoBandit. I didn't know you were here, even though I had to animate this phone call in advance, but anyway, what's up?
Heard you were talking about bandits, and I thought, what better way to discuss a topic like this than with yours truly? You know, the Masked Nintendo Bandit.
Can't argue with that. Take it away.
Will do, sir. The reason why the Misco treasure hunt found in DLC Pack 1 and 2 stands out from the other collectibles is that it actually ties into an already established lore piece from the base game. The side quest that's fittingly titled Misco, the Great Bandit. I'm pretty sure most fans will be familiar with it since the side quest itself is found inside the Dueling Peaks stable, which is likely one of the first places you encounter if you follow King Rome's directions and head straight for Kakariko right after leaving the Great Plateau. You talk to these two guys, grease some palms, and then they give you a riddle to solve which leads to a treasure allegedly belonging to this infamous bandit Misco. Who this guy actually is or was is actually something that we're going to discuss further in my part of the collab. In this video, we're gonna focus on the loot he managed to acquire over the span of his badass bandit career. We have the Phantom Armor, Midna's Helmet, Korok Mask, and Majora's Mask in DLC Pack 1, and the Lobster Shirt, Ravio's Hood, Xant's Helmet, Phantom Ganon Armor, and Royal Guard Uniform in DLC Pack 2. Obviously, if we had to explain where each and every one of them came from and how they may have all transcended from their respective games into Breath of the Wild, we would be here all week. They could all probably have an entire theory video devoted to them just trying to explain how and why, but the main point here is that although they could be considered as nods to the past and nothing more, there is actually very little standing in the way of their inclusion being canonical to the franchise. Let's take the Majora's Mask for example. Yes, the evil entity known as Majora has left the mask by the end of the game, but the mask itself still exists, and was likely taken back to Hyrule by the Happy Mask salesman when he departed Termina, since, well, that's where he originated from in the first place. The mask has obviously lost most of its power since then, and judging from the fact that the moon isn't growing an angry face in Breath of the Wild, it's safe to assume that this is still the case after all these countless years.
The same thing could be said about many, if not all the other artifacts that make up Misco's fortunes. No matter how far-fetched, there's always a way to explain these relics still persisting to this day. Whether it's because they were never completely destroyed or lost in the first place, or maybe it's a replica made to remember, honor, or memorialize a specific event or individual. Who knows? Which is why the backstory behind the Misco DLC side quest does make sense canonically. The relics are described to have originally been in the possession of the royal family of Hyrule before they were nabbed by Misco at some point in time. Each and every one of these artifacts has some degree of historical significance, so if anything, it would make less sense for the royal family not to preserve them. Similar to how in our own world we have relics on display, some of which hundreds of thousands of years old, the Hylians may have been doing the same thing. Throughout history, these ancient objects could have been passed down from one person to the next or replicated until they ultimately land in the hands of Hyrule's leadership. Yes, even Tingle's outfit can be considered as such. Despite his strange demeanor, he did in fact aid the various heroes of Hyrule on multiple occasions across the timeline. He is as much a historical figure as any.
So, in a sense, Hyrule Castle housed a museum of some kind, a place where these ancient relics from the distant past were kept. But unlike a museum, it is more likely that these weren't open to the public, but only accessible to those close to the royal family. Very similar to the vaults of Vatican City, of which most of its contents are still a mystery to this day and are ripe for all kinds of theories. From the magical like the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant, to flat out crazy alien Illuminati conspiracy theories, to the more realistic stuff like letters and leftovers from historical figures. It's definitely not too far-fetched to think that the royal family had these ancient objects stored away somewhere, until Misco ultimately managed to break in and take off with some of it. The royal family has historically been very serious about passing down and preserving all kinds of magical artifacts. Stuff like the Ocarina of Time, for instance, which kind of makes you think, do these vaults still reside in Hyrule Castle right now? If so, what else could be hidden there? It's unlikely that Misco managed to clean out the whole place, right? There have been many speculations about the disappearance of certain important objects, like the aforementioned Ocarina of Time, for instance, which isn't ever seen again after the events of Majora's Mask. Maybe Link did eventually return it to the royal family after his trip to Termina, but just think about that for a moment. The famous Ocarina of Time could be right here, hidden somewhere within the walls of Hyrule Castle right now, if only we could get to it. But hey, maybe we'll find out more in a certain sequel to Breath of the Wild. With all that said though, one question remains. Who is or was Misco, the Great Bandit? What was his motivation and where is he now? Is he long gone or is he still among us somewhere?
Well, there is the fact that his journal just shows up in the...
No spoilers. We will dive deeper into the mystery of the Great Bandit himself over on my channel, MaskedNintendoBandit.
Yeah, that seems fair.
Right you are, sir. So if you're interested in finding out the identity of Misco, the Great Bandit, follow the link in the description below to head on over to the video that's already live over on my channel. It also features your main man, Monster Maze, of course.
You heard the man. Anyway, a big thanks to MaskedNintendoBandit for joining me on this one. It's always fun working with you.
Thanks so much for having me, man. It's always a pleasure to work together on videos. If you guys are interested in more Zelda wild theories or other kinds of Nintendo nonsense, head on over to my channel and check me out. This is MaskedNintendoBandit, signing out.
And as always, a big thanks to you for watching, and who could forget my gracious Patreon supporters and channel members. We got some new faces, so say hello to Jeff Shepstone, Rachel Ann, Ipkiz, Mr. Red Banana, thanks for joining on the Minecraft livestream by the way, and Andres Monge Rodriguez. So sorry if I butchered your name. And that is all for today. I hope to see you in the next one. We have the next part of the evolution of Hyrule coming up soon, so join me then if you will. This is Don signing off, and have a good one.